Just as a quick note before this begins, I am not recommending that you dose any psychedelics. This is entirely for harm reduction purposes, so if you, on your own will and decision, do eat some psychedelic mushrooms, these are suggestions on how to do so in a psychologically and physically safe container. Hello everyone, my name is James Jesso, the host of the Adventures Through the Mind podcast and YouTube channel. So today I want to talk to you guys about building ceremonies around psilocybin. As many of you know, I'm a huge supporter of the psilocybin mushroom and its potential in each of our lives to radically transform our capacities for courage, presence, and freedom. I've written multiple articles and essays, given lots of talks on it, even wrote a book, 2 books actually, but Decomposing the Shadow, what you saw there, is one of them. And so in my time with it, I've really come to explore what it means to build safe containers or ceremonies inside of my psilocybin experiences that are personally meaningful to myself and personally meaningful to the other people involved, but don't rely on any form of cultural appropriation or say aesthetic song and dance from any culture outside of the ones I most deeply relate to, which in the Western world is not the best kind of culture, but it's what I got. And I want to share that with you guys in case it is helpful for you. First of all, I want to talk about what ceremony is, because ceremony is not what is done inside a container of some sort. Ceremony is not the feathers, it's not the songs, it's not the aesthetic, it's not the sage, it's not the smudge. The ceremony is a state of being. The ceremony is a state of experience. It's a container that is opened and it is closed, and within that state of being, there is an opportunity for encounters with that which rests on the other side of our altered states. And it isn't the aesthetic, it's a meaningfulness. It's a meaningfulness within ourselves and within our practices and within our community. I think it is very important to create ceremony around the use of psilocybin and psychedelics in general if one is choosing to work with them as a way of bettering your life, bettering your sense of self, especially if one is choosing to use them to explore the more uncomfortable aspects of oneself, to go into the more difficult experiences. A ceremony or a safe container, if structured in a way that feels safe, can give someone something to rest into in order to allow more uncomfortable content to emerge with surrender and presence. Let's divide this into 3 aspects: pre, which is before; peri, which is during; and post, which is after. One of the most important parts of the pre, other than sourcing, is our intention, which is what we know about the mushroom, how we see the mushroom, and what it is that we're looking for, all of which inspiring the manner in which we approach them. So what we know about the mushroom is basically what we've read, what we've heard from other peoples, what we believe about them. It's sort of the prep work that we do in order to prepare ourselves to understand what we're going through. It's also what we know about ourselves and what we know about psychology, what we know about spirituality, what we know about our family history, because the mushrooms, although they can bring us transpersonal information and transpersonal experiences, things that expand beyond our normal sense of individuated self, they can only really work with what's there. And so if you're not showing up very much, you're probably not going to get very much. And if you do get very much, you won't have a syntactical capacity to make sense of it in a way that it carries forth in your life. So reading in advance things about mushrooms, about the psychedelic experience, and about specifically about the way in which you want to use the mushrooms, which for me is often psychodynamic, which is to say exploring aspects of myself, and thus reading about psychology and spirituality. So you have something that you're showing up with, something that the mushrooms can work with. The other aspect of intention is what you see the mushrooms as being. Do you see them as tools? Do you see them as chemical messengers? Do you see them as molecular keys? Do you see them as an intelligent organism that has the capacity to engage in a mysterious marriage with the unconscious aspects of yourself in a way that creates a symbiotic relationship of exposure to the profoundly uncomfortable but often necessary truth of why you are who you are and how you became that way, and all of the emotional honesty that is sewn into our history and our presence and our future, which you could probably assume that last one is the way that I see it. How you see the mushroom makes a big difference, but ultimately there's no cultural rules here. It's up to you how you see them, and you don't have to necessarily take anyone's particular way of doing so, but if something feels like it fits, then try it on. The next bit is what you're looking for. Now, this is the part of the intention that I think most people are very familiar with. This is like, my intention tonight is to open up to my family history. My intention tonight is to merge with the spirit of the mushroom and be playful. My intention tonight is to go off into the woods and communicate with the spirit of the forest. These are things that might be intentions in the sense of what you're looking for. I believe that leading up to your ceremony, leading up to whatever experience you're choosing to have, it makes sense to get an idea of what it is that you're looking for by thinking about it. And not only thinking about it, but also writing about it, exploring, talking to other people about it, people that you can feel safe with, people that can give you good feedback, and getting a pretty clear idea, getting a clear single statement intention that is simple as we approach the ceremony, I think can be really helpful in giving a sense of direction to what we're going in for and why we're doing it. These three factors of what you know, how you see the mushroom, and what it is that you're looking for would then influence how you approach the experience. And how you approach might be with a group of friends. It could be with where everybody's dosing together. That could be, out in the wilderness, or it could be in a more secure environment. It might also be by yourself. It might be with a sitter, whether that be a sitter that's also taking a little bit, or a sitter that is staying sober. What it is that you're looking for, I'd say the depth of intensity of potentially uncomfortable content that is likely to surface based in your intention would determine whether or not you would want to do it by yourself, or whether or not you would want to have someone sitting with you, or whether or not you'd want to be in a group of others. Also, of course, your experience with the mushroom would all influence that. Approach is also what you're eating, whether or not you're eating, it's how much you're meditating beforehand. It's really the days and weeks prior to your ceremony that the way that you live and what comes up for you, what comes up in your mind as you approach the sort of critical hour. So I'll give you a personal example of how it is that I approach. So when I know that it's time for me to do a ceremony, I start to journal about why, and I start to consider why. I start to talk to people I know about why, and oftentimes I will start to go back into my old journals. I keep a specific journal just for my mushroom experiences, and I start to go back and take a look. I start to excavate a little bit and see if there's some reason, like specific reason why it is that I feel like it's time. This is assuming that I've given it a lot of thought and it's not a spontaneous, intuitive knowing that right now is the time, here we go. But if I'm really thinking about it in advance, that's one of the things that I do to prepare, especially journaling as a writer. That is something that I found really helps me align my thoughts, to say, put the chaos of the thinking mind in alignment by putting it on a line. So let's get into Peri. Peri is during, which is to say, like right now the ceremony is tonight. And so there's the opening of the ceremonial container, and there's the being in the ceremonial container and the closing of the ceremonial container, which is all a part of, in my mind, the Peri, the during. So whether you're with someone or not with someone, a way that I find to be very nourishing in preparing myself for opening the ceremony is to sit with the mushrooms and talk with them. Tell them about why I'm there and what it is that I'm looking for and what I'm afraid of, and just like really go all out. And I understand to some degree I'm just talking to myself and just priming my subconscious, but to another degree I believe that I'm communicating with some sort of I hesitate because I'm so rational sometimes, but it's the spirit of the mushroom, the spirit of how the mushroom is alive in me by talking to it. And I find it very therapeutic. It also gives me a sense, I guess, of feeling safe because I can ask them to be easy on me. I can ask them to be friendly with me. I can ask them to be honest with me too and not be afraid to offer me the truth. Typically, there are 3 specific things I'd like to talk to the mushroom about. The first is what my intention is, why I'm there. So for example, let's say my intention is to explore the impact my childhood relationship with my mother has on my relationship to women now. So that's my intention. I'll tell them my intention. Then I will tell them why I'm afraid. Like if there's anything that brings me up fear. For example, I could say to them, that's my intention and I'm afraid that I'm gonna feel alone and that I'm not gonna feel safe and I'm going to be frightened and I'm gonna be uncomfortable. Or, from my own recent physical experiences, I'm afraid that I'll have a hypoglycemic episode or perceive that I'm having one while I'm tripping that'll distract me from the work at hand and cause me terror and fear of death, and thus anxiety and a negative reinforcement of what was at some point full-blown post-traumatic stress disorder for me. So that would be one of my fears. And then I'll say what it is that I love about the mushrooms, or one thing of absolute beauty that they've offered me. For example, the sense of free-flowing, complex movement in my body, that when I move, it's as though there's something different, there's something more elegant, there's something more subtly alive in me that oftentimes my normal baseline consciousness does not allow me to tap into, but when I'm tapped into, I feel incredibly nourished by. These 3 things, the intentions, the fears, and one thing that I find beautiful about the mushrooms is something that I'll also share with a group. And if I'm in a group, we'll each go around in the group and share that. I think that acknowledging what we're afraid of is actually very important. And there are 3 reasons for that. The first is that if I don't acknowledge what I'm afraid of, then I can't be courageous about it. And the second reason, especially with other people, is oftentimes we don't talk about what we're afraid of because we're ashamed of being afraid. Our culture kind of leads us up to saying that like strong fearlessness and gusto and go get 'em, that is the ultimate expression of one's being, and that being afraid is something vulnerable and vulnerability is something to be ashamed of. And most of us have had guilt and shame used against us to modify our behavior throughout the course of our lives. So by saying openly what you're afraid of, then you can release a little bit of that shame, especially during the ceremony with other people. If at some point you feel like, whoa, I don't feel safe, I need to feel safe, I need to ask for help, then if you're in a group of people and you've already told them what you're afraid of, then you've already done like what could be like the hardest work of admitting that you're afraid, especially on psychedelics, is the shame of not being strong enough or something. And I think it really increases the capacity for others to help us and for us to be able to ask for that help and to be vulnerable. The third thing is that, especially in a group, it increases group responsibility. If everyone in the group already has told everyone else what it is that they are afraid of, not only can each individual person not feel shame around asking for help and admitting that they're afraid if it happens, but also, each person in the group is already aware that that other person might open up about it, and so that they're more able, having prepared when sober, to to respond. So it helps increase group responsibility. We've already talked about why intention is important for a guiding post into, and after talking about fear, I think that it's nice to end on something beautiful so we don't end on something dark and kind of scary. And talking about one of the gifts or blessings the mushroom has offered is a really good way to end on a positive note, so that yes, this is why we're here, and yes, we acknowledge that this is why we're afraid, but here's this other reason why we're here, because it's also magical and beautiful and life nourishing too. Yerba mate. Another aspect of the Peri would be music. I highly suggest you select your music in advance, and I think it's good to have music that doesn't have vocals, or music that has vocals in a language you don't understand, or no music at all. Personally, those are my preferences. I like listening to music. I like listening to sort of strange, lack of better terminology, down-tempo psychedelic music with very little bass line and a very strong connection to beautiful melody. I've actually thrown links to some of my favorite tripping music in the description below. Another thing during the ceremony, especially with groups, is if working for psychodynamic purposes, is to allow each other privacy, which is public privacy in a way. You're all in the room together and you all focus on your own inner journeys rather than talking with each other, playing games. You are focusing on your own internal experience and giving space for each other to go there, knowing that during the experience it has already been established upon that you could reach out for help at any time, and that the individuals in the group are able and willing to be able to your calls for help, and you are able to be responsible to other people's calls for help. So during the experience for me, stuff will come up, stuff that feels really important, stuff that I want to sort out, things that I want to figure out, things that I do want to feel, things that I don't want to feel, all of which I believe is almost like part of the practice to just completely surrender onto those things. I used to call it the fine line of the ultimate capacity for control, which is to surrender control. And it's constantly walking that fine line of giving into surrender, giving into surrender, giving into surrender, giving into surrender. And then as these things come up, sometimes I'm like, oh, this is so good, I want to write it down. But then I know that, wait, if I just practice the art of waiting, perhaps that thing that I think is very important to remember to write down is actually a stepping stone onto something else, a greater revelation, that if I just wait a little bit longer, I'll know, boom, there's the ripe moment. But if I write it down too soon, I catch it before it's ripe. Or if I wait too long, then I might miss it and kind of miss when it's ripe. So I think that's a subtle skill set that comes with practice with a mushroom over time. When there is something that comes up and I'm like, boom, that's it, that's the right moment, I'll make a note about it in my mind, or I'll quickly jot it down. But typically I don't want to be doing anything but being with my experience during my experience. So I'll make a note of it. And then this is kind of going into the post, because as the experience unfolds, at some point everyone will probably realize that the personal aspects have sort of emerged into the interpersonal aspects, and it's time to start communicating, start playing with each other, start to engaging with positive, social engagement between each other. And I think this is very nourishing, especially with a group, and it shouldn't be missed out on if you have the opportunity to do so, because play is important, and as much as this work is important too, you can't take yourself too seriously, and being with others is a really great, especially tripping mushrooms, is a really great way to bond and build friendship and deepen friendship, and engaging with each other is really important. And when you start to engage with each other, now is a pretty good time to start maybe talking about some of the things that you realize. Maybe when you're still tripping, it's not the best time, but as you're getting closer and closer to sobriety, this is a time when maybe you can set out onto yourself to journal some things down or bring some things up with the other members of the group. If I do journal things, I don't typically, they'll be the things that I made a note of earlier in my mind, and I won't try to journal it all out. I'll just write a single statement that later works as a gateway or an access point to the emotionality and the revelation that I came to during that experience experience so that in a sober state of mind, I can come down and I can contemplate it. I can journal about it in fullness from this place of being sober, having used this simple statement as the gateway to open that up. And then the journaling about it is part of integration. And then sharing it with other people in the group is a good way to get kind of feedback on stuff. You can take notes on those types of things. I think taking notes is great, but I'm also a writer, so I'm a bit biased. When everything's all said and done, maybe you're going home, you're going to sleep, or maybe you're staying there. The essential bit here is to give your mind and body rest, to have given yourself, once the ceremony is closed, which is to say, we open the ceremony by having our personal talks with the mushroom and then sharing those 3 things with each other as a group. And then we close the ceremony by, saying, okay, I feel finished, it's time to leave. We all maybe hug or something, but some sort of way to say like, okay, the container is now closed, we're back. After the container is closed and we move on to our lives, now the real integration phase begins. Like I said before, the gateways that I will write down, I'll journal about those things. I'll give myself space to think about it. I'll give myself space that next day to ensure that I don't have very many responsibilities so that I can journal, so that I can meditate. And also I think it's important to meet up again with the people that you journeyed with, to talk to them about your revelations, about your experiences and what they're increasingly meaning in your life, and to listen to theirs as well as a good witness. Although I would caution you on sharing your story with people who A, won't understand, or B, too soon, before you've had time to really mull it over in your own mind and get a clear, crystalline sense of what it means, and then start getting feedback and then start reassessing. I think if we give our story away too soon, we give it away before it lands in who we are, and it just becomes almost like an aesthetic rather than an aesthetic passing experience rather than a profound transformative shift in who we are. Unless, of course, it's with your therapist, which probably good to just talk about things as openly as possible if you have a therapist or an integration coach, because that's what they're there for. So hopefully this all makes sense. And if I do a good job in post-production, it will. But here is, again, sort of like the recap. We've got the pre, the peri, and the post. The pre is about your intention, which is established from what you know about not only the mushrooms, about the psychedelic, but yourself, as well as how you see the psychedelic that you're taking, and then what it is you're looking to get with them, which all contributes to the manner in which you approach your experience. During the experience leading up, we open the ceremony and open the ceremonial space. My suggestion is to talk personally with the mushrooms and then talk openly with each other as a group, exploring 3 specific things: why you're there, your intention, what you're afraid of, and a blessing, something beautiful that the mushroom has offered you in your life. Then after the dosing, during the actual experience, you offer each other a sense of safety and privacy in the group, while knowing, having established in advance, that it is okay at any point to ask for help if it is needed. So you have that sense of safety, because that sense of safety is what makes the real difference as to whether or not, when the stuff gets uncomfortable, you're able to surrender. Bad timing. Surrender. And of course, during the experience, we're surrendering. We're allowing ourselves to feel what's there, waiting for that ripe moment to say, yeah, that's the thing, making a note of it, and then coming back later as we all integrate after perhaps the moment of playful interpersonal engagement has come about and we've been playing in that space for a little while, maybe engaging some of the games that people like Julian Vane offers in his book, or what have you. We come down, we're getting sober. This is the time where we might want to start taking notes, not extensive notes, but like finding those right moments that we made a mental note of, and then a short phrase or a word or a gateway or a little picture, something that will unlock the emotional revelatory aspect. of that ripe moment later, when we eventually begin integrating that experience through journaling, contemplation, and also conversation with the other people that we were engaged with, and eventually maybe conversation out into our larger community, being conscientious of not giving away the story too soon before it has an opportunity to land with depth, before it has an opportunity to become a part of who we are, and especially not giving it away to people who won't be able to understand, and the simple act of their lack of understanding, or the simple aspect of their lack of understanding, tarnishes the purity and the beauty and the meaningfulness of that experience for yourself. So thank you for listening. I wish you many blessings of safety and transformation on whatever journeys you choose to take from here. If you would like to learn more about my thoughts on working with psilocybin mushrooms and get an idea of how I see them and what I believe that they can do for us as humanity, you can check out my book, Decomposing the Shadow, or my other book, The True Light of Darkness, both of which are linked in the description below for you to check out. Buying a book is, of course, a great way to financially support the growth and sustainability of this YouTube channel. You could also become my patron on Patreon and get linked up with all the special little rewards for the various tiers of patron pledges. There are other ways that you can financially support, also in the description below, and of course subscribe to the channel. I know that's a lot of things, but hopefully one of those things inspired you and you will jump on it. Thank you very much for watching this video all the way to its very long ending, and I wish you the best. I will see you next Friday for the next episode of the Adventures of the Mind podcast.